Our next speaker is Neil Trigger. Neil Trigger is an international speaker on this subject, and I believe he has been to Wales to talk about it, as well as Sweden and lots of other places as well. Neil is one of these really unusual people in the sense that he's actually doing some research into NLP. One of the biggest criticisms about NLP is its lack of specific research, although a lot of the tools and techniques and processes from NLP have been pinched from other areas that have actually done the research. There are very few people who are doing an awful lot of research into NLP itself. And when Neil was asking me I was asking Neil what his title was for his presentation, he said, I could use my PhD title, but I've only got 30 minutes. And it'd probably take 30 minutes to read it. So can we welcome Neil onto the stage, please?
Hello. Hello. Hello! I can't believe you did that. Right. My name's Neil Trigger, and I'm going to be talking to you about email persuasion. And it's essentially how to use NLP to gain rapport across a digital interface. You know how soft skills are often sort of face-to-face. People mirror each other using body language, tone of voice, volume, that sort of thing. Well, you can't really do that across a digital interface, and so I'm going to be explaining how you can. Now, I'm going to also shake up your model of the world a little bit. I'm going to be a bit sort of energetic, hopefully, and I'm just going to talk about first impressions to begin with. So who am I? Neil Trigger, NLP practitioner and coach. I also studied hypnosis. In 1998, I started looking into it because I was a professional magician and started looking into how people can be convinced that a card can float up through a deck. And they're almost suspending disbelief, and that really intrigued me, and I thought, you know, it's got something to do with perception and misdirection, and hypnosis will be a great tool in my arsenal for that. I completed a study on persuasion in 2006 as part of my degree. I actually created a website that can direct people through 12 separate stages of every single page being exactly as I want them to. But my tutors thought it was unethical. There we are. I started a PhD in 2008. It was at the same place. And I've lectured in Stockholm and that sort of thing. And I've also created some software which uses NLP. And I think, as far as I know, it's the first of its kind, which is why we've got a patent pending on it at the moment. So, what you'll learn. What is persuasion? I'll tell you 3 steps to persuasion. And the importance of being positive. Now, how many people have had spam here? Spam email? Everyone's hand goes up. I actually went, in 2009, I signed up myself to as much spam as I could possibly get my hands on in order to see how positive and negative it was. And the majority of it said things like, why not visit our website? And I thought, well, what your conscious mind is doing is saying, oh, that's a really good idea, visit the website. But what your unconscious mind is doing is saying, why do you not visit our website? Think of all the reasons why you should not visit our website. And I actually found that almost offensive, really, because you start to build up all these different reasons. It's a bit like Orange. I know I was talking to some people in the break about Orange text messaging for buy one, get one free, Orange Wednesdays. They send things out saying, why not visit the cinema with a friend? And you think, because I don't have enough money, because I don't have any friends, because there's nothing on that I want to watch, and the weather's rubbish. But your unconscious mind goes, ooh, great idea. Now, your conscious mind will increase sales for Orange, on average, by about 12% every time they send out that text message. But if they were to be positive, you can increase it by 45%. So instead of saying, why not visit the cinema, visit the cinema. Okay? And we'll also go a bit deeper using rapport. And then extend that to online persuasion. And there's other little bits and bobs that I'll add in at the end as well. Now this guy, what is persuasion? This guy here, he's got a big bushy beard, which means that he's important. In ancient Greece, if you had a big beard on your bust, if you had a hairy bust, then you'd be important. slightly different these days. So it all started in ancient Greece with this guy called Aristotle. And he's very important because he wore a toga, and togas are cool. His idea was to move the audience. And he was very much into his public speaking. He did a lot, actually, for medicine and that sort of thing as well. But his idea was to move the audience, to take them from one perceptual position, if you want to use an NLP analogy, to a completely other one. And it was a do with technology rather than a do to. So it was a conducive thing where they would actually try to gain rapport with that person in order to move them. You can't just say, move. It's not going to work. So 3 steps to persuasion he postulated was ethos, which is the character of the persuader, which is exactly why, these days, Martin's introduced every speaker so far. Because if he didn't, the ethos wouldn't be there. That speaker would not be credible. And as a demonstration, if I came on stage like this, it would be a slight difference, wouldn't it? And then if I took off my tie, again, slight difference. Again, slight difference. And you can see that all of these things do actually make a significant difference. Now I look like a complete idiot. So I'll quickly undo all of that stuff. But the point is clear that the ethos or the character of your persuader is going to make a significant difference to how persuasive that person is. The next thing would be pathos, or the emotional reason to change. And I'll go into that in just a second. But the logos is the logical reason to change. Now, a good example of all 3 of these, the emotional reason, you've got to give someone a hook to change. I'm working with a charity at the moment which is involved in older people, and frankly, to be absolutely honest, guys, older people are not sexy. They're not. If you work with the PDSA, big eyes, I call it the big eye syndrome. I don't think it's a technical term, but that's what I call it. Children, those dying, and animals, they will get far more money than older people, I guarantee it. And it's because of the emotional reason to change. It's the emotional reason to engage. And if you can get that emotional reason, you will always get more money out of people. But then the logos is the logical reason. So you need to say, do this, get that. It's very black and white. And black and white has its own problems, so I'll get onto that. So an example would be your money or your life. It's a bit dated now, but if I shoved a gun in Martin's face and said, give me your money or I will shoot you, that engages all 3. Because you're holding a gun, first of all. What's your character like? If in this country you can get hold of a gun, I trust you could shoot me. The pathos, the emotional reason. Give me your money or I'll shoot you. If you shoot me, I'll die. I don't want to die. That's a motive. If you're not moved emotionally by not wanting to die, you're not alive in the first place, let's be honest. And then the logical reason, if this, then that. So that's a good example there. So you can go deeper using rapport. So what is rapport? I know that we've talked about various different aspects of NLP throughout today, but I would say it's the level at which to communicate a deep message of truth. So you can go into that in certain different ways, but it's the way that you can blur boundaries of reality. And that's, for me, that's the best explanation of it. Because with rapport, I'm like you, therefore you are like me. Therefore, if I have certain aspects of myself that's to do with you, I can inherit your attributes. Most people, hands up here, who does not like themselves. Point taken. So, if you like yourself and I'm like you, what does that say? You like me. Yeah? So you can actually blur the boundaries of reality, and I've got a really good example of this. When I was in London at a business competition, by the end of the competition, I'd beaten 38,000 people to actually win this competition. But as part of the process, we had a group interview with 6 judges. And my friend and I both attended this interview, and we'd agreed that I would mirror each judge in turn while he answered the questions. So he said, hello, shook everyone's hand, introduced ourselves, sat down. He answered all the questions. Meanwhile, I was mirroring every single judge as they were asking questions. And at the end, we all stood up. I shook hands with every judge. And at one particular point, one of the judges leaned forward and said, I loved what you said about blah, blah, blah. And it was actually her idea. And why did she like the idea? Because it was her idea. And I just thought that was absolutely fantastic as a way of getting that sort of report and that sort of credibility by borrowing it from someone else. So from my point of view, it's all based on mirroring. And it's not mimicking. Otherwise, you get this. Well, actually, that's 2 right feet. I couldn't find an image of 2 left. But the problem is, if you're exactly the same, then you will be dancing around with 2 left feet. So this is my definition of NLP. It involves mirroring. And when you ask what is NLP, often they'll say mirroring, they'll say eye-accessing cues. They'll also say anchoring, and I think Tony mentioned that very briefly a moment ago. And then perceptual positioning, we've got using submodalities and all of that sort of stuff as well. But the problem is that online you can't really use mirroring. It's a computer-mediated communication. It's not a two-way street. So it's not really mirroring online. You can't do that very easily. You also can't use eye-accessing cues. Unless you've got something like a Tobii eye tracker, you're not going to be able to do it very easily. You also can't really anchor. You certainly can't reach out to the computer screen and shut someone on the arm. And you can't really use perceptual positioning either. You can't really use submodalities. So when I was researching this, I found it really, really difficult to pin down exactly how I could use NLP online. So I then started to look back, and I thought, mirroring doesn't need to be physical. You could mirror other things. Eye-accessing cues, okay, let's ignore that for a minute. Anchoring doesn't need to be physical. It doesn't need to be auditory. There's something, and I was talking to Tim about this, about somatic markers. If you smell a particular smell, often it will take you back. If you hear certain things, again, it will take you back. There are different ways of anchoring various different states, and it doesn't need to be physical. Perceptual positions, okay, I'll ignore that. Using submodalities, okay, I'll ignore that. So then I had, okay, mirroring and anchoring. Let's play with that. Now, I know that we introduced the 4 ways of thinking with Matthew's talk. So the first one is visual. You think visually, you think to do with eyesight. You think to do with pictures. You'd say things like, I see what you mean. Then you've got auditory. And auditory are to do with sounds. They would say things like, do you hear what I'm saying? And then you've got the kinesthetics, and I really love the kinesthetics, because that's to do with feeling and emotion. And they would say things like, do you get it? Do you grasp the concept? And what I find really interesting with this is that I gave a talk at a networking event, and afterwards someone came up to me and said, what you said really struck a chord with me. I feel that I'm really visual. Another guy said, I never talk in negatives, which... And then there's the digital. And the digital, unfortunately, that's me, and you can probably tell from the lack of pictures on here. But it's all to do with intellectualizing and thoughtfulness and analytical. And they would say things like, do you understand? Do you comprehend? And does that make sense? So all sorts of abstract notions of exactly the same way. But the interesting thing here is that all of that content, the content itself is exactly the same. It's just expressed in 4 different ways. And so you can apply that sort of idea, and I used it to analyze the Queen's speech. And what was really interesting is that using not only the predicates, like see, feel, touch, taste, smell, all of those sorts of things, you can also use positive and negatives. So not is obviously a very negative word. Then you've got but, which according to Grindler and Bandler, put my teeth in, Grinder and Bandler, is it detracts from everything that's gone before. So I analysed the Queen's speech for positives and negatives, and also the number of kinesthetic words in there as well, in order to work out some sort of positive-negative balance. And what I found was that I compared it to the country's GDP. Now, for those who don't know, GDP stands for Gross Domestic Product, and it's a way of analysing the economy and how well the economy is actually doing. And to my surprise, it did correlate. Now, obviously, it's not a very scientific study, because it's only one speech and the whole rest of the year, and loads of stuff can happen. But, and there were some examples of where it didn't correlate, but about 85% of the time it did correlate. And so I then started to think, okay, maybe I've got something here, I'll start to investigate it a bit more. And so I started looking at my Twitter account, and that's a lot more real time, and I've got about 11,000 people on my other Twitter account. The Manteo one, I think, has got about 2,000 people. So I started to look at various different ways of analysing Twitter accounts, and I wrote an application to do that. And what I found is that any fluctuations in their positivity and negativity can be very, very interesting, because you can predict the stock market with it. The FTSE 100 index goes up or down depending on how positive and negative people are being, because of the bull or bear mentality. So if someone's very bearish, they'll want to hide away, and they won't want to buy, and therefore everything's going to sort of stagnate. And if they're bullish, then they'll want to sort of go all in. And you can recognize that in positivity and negativity. If someone's very scared, then they'll often sell. If they're very, yeah, this is going to work, then they'll buy. So that actually correlates as well. So the FTSE 100 index goes up and down in relation to my Twitter account. Who would have thought it? So you can actually use that in real time. And so now for some practical stuff. Because a lot of people here, how many people have got Twitter accounts? Okay, I'll expect 30 new followers by the end of this. So consider this email, and it's a real email. The names have been changed to protect the innocent, or not so innocent. And it's an email to a hypnotherapist. And I'll see if I can read it out to you. Dear Mike, I feel that you may be able to help. I feel really bogged down and stuck with a problem that's really getting on top of me. I just can't find a way forward. I need a helping hand to pull myself out of what I can only feel is a pit of depression. Is that the kind of thing you handle? So what sort of modality would that person be talking in? Kinesthetic, exactly. Then consider the response. Hi Alice, I see what the problem is. Oh, sorry, I see the problem. And from the picture you're painting, it's clear that you're looking at things with not such rose-tinted glasses. If you'd like to come and see me, we can take a better look at the issue together and see if we can find a brighter future for you. On the face of it, and consciously, great response. Absolutely brilliant, really positive. But the problem is that these red words here are all the kinesthetics. And then he wrote back with all the blue ones there, which are all the visuals. And what do you think the response was? A massive clash. And so the result, in real terms, was absolutely no response. He didn't get a single reply. There's radio silence for 6 whole weeks. He just didn't get any reply. It's like they dropped off the face of the planet. And something needed to be done. So he called me in and said, you know, what do I do about this? I'm a hypnotherapist. I know about modalities. Obviously, I'm not doing something right. So I said, okay, well, that's your original email. That's your old response. Let's rewrite it. And just ignore the fact that you've already sent it, but just totally rewrite it and send it again. And so the new one said, Dear Alice, I get the problem, and from the feelings that you have, I feel that you're too stuck in the issue to pull yourself out without help. If you'd like to come and mull things over with me, we can see, okay, you used C, but never mind, whether a different standpoint might be better for you to try and dig yourself or dig a way out together. And together is a very kinesthetic, sort of touchy-feely. Things are never as bad as they feel in the moment, so we'll make you warm and fuzzy again. And then there's a little emoticon, one of those smiley faces. I wouldn't normally recommend that in a business email, but it seemed to work for him. And then he said all the best. Now, I use all the best to sign off my emails because it's a way of saying everything above this is all the best that I can possibly give you. And it may be a very unconscious thing, but it seems to really work. And so the new result was there was a positive result within 1 hour, and he sent it at 10:30. He got a response at 11:28 p.m. He got a booking, he got payment up front, and probably most importantly, they got a sense of connection. And you'll also notice that connection is a very kinesthetic word. And that then led to referrals. So purely from a small change, and I know that Andy mentioned this at the beginning, from a small change in the wording, you can get a dramatic effect at the end. And even to the point now where I could say to you all, I could change your perceptions like that. Because until I said this sentence, you were unaware of how your left foot felt. And now you're aware of it. Now you can do that with negative language as well. So do not think of a black cat on your table. But you have to, because I've embedded the command. Do not think of that black cat turning round and round in circles. You have to. In fact, you're paying so much attention to that black cat, you've probably forgotten about your left foot. And now you remember it again. So the problem is that this kind of analysis can take an awful lot of time. And being positive can be hard, let's face it. Sometimes you have a bad day. So even people who know about predicates, like this hypnotist, don't tend to apply it consciously. And I get hundreds of emails a day. How many people get hundreds of emails a day? Yeah, quite a few. And if you're like me, you need a quicker solution. So, the problem continued. To analyze every email, you need a computerized system to run through every single word or phrase in your incoming email, categorize it according to these 4 categories. Then you need to analyze your response against the same sort of criteria. And then you need to compare the 2 scores to see where there's a clash. Then you need to be told what needs changing, and then you need to change it. And no such system exists. No such system existed. I actually created one, or we made one. Can't claim all the accolades for myself. And so here it is. And in case you can't see it, it's there. There. So it's very subtle. It embeds into Outlook. And what you can then do is the example that I used there is actually written there as an email incoming. And you then respond to it, just as you normally would, just click on reply. You then click on the send button, that one there. Sorry, I'm really playing down to you guys. And then the program just takes over. So here the grey line there shows what it should be, and the green line shows what it is. And likewise, the grey line up here shows the visuals, and obviously there's a big mismatch there. So then, you click on the view button, and it gives you all of the predicates here as a big list, and you can scroll down there. So you can either ignore them, or you can change them. And when you click on change on a particular one, then it will give you the whole paragraph so that you can then reword it as you want to. So once you've reworded it, it will then dynamically change as well. Now the other applications of this idea, you can actually analyze all of your Twitter followers yourself by going to this website, mantea.com/tweet checker. And it will make your status updates effectively more persuasive by finding out exactly how your Twitter followers like to be communicated to. Because ultimately, if you can work out how they think and how they talk, you can then communicate with them in the way that they prefer, and their responses are often better. You can analyze your Facebook friends by going to mantea.com/FFC. Loads of pens scribbling down. And here are some of the results that I've got from it. Mantea was recommended to us when we attended an email best practice seminar. We gained a 42% increase in click-through traffic just by changing the email subject to be more positive. That was an event that she wanted everyone to go to. And basically she said in the subject header, it's something like visit our event or come to our event. And I said, that doesn't make them feel special enough. You need to really engage with them and make the email the invite. And people like to see invites. I was talking to someone over lunch about the best sales technique. And I was thinking about it, and I thought, actually, there was one particular guy who was fantastic at getting my engagement. And all I did, I was walking into a supermarket, and he held up this piece of paper that I couldn't read and just went, "Have you heard the news?" And I just thought, what on earth is he talking about? What's that? And I couldn't see it. Walked up to him. Instantly, he had me. Okay, I didn't buy from him, but it was a great technique. And what we did with this particular email, we said, invite only, email marketing seminar, or whatever the seminar was, I can't remember now. Neil Bullman from Business Link said, it will certainly exceed your expectations. And as I said in my blurb, we've got 900% increases in turnover some places. Excellent professional product. I've got loads of these things. We've definitely seen a rise in our inquiry levels and bookings. Research the highest academic standards, bless him. Knowledge of the human brain is astonishing. I'm starting to blush now. Every business should think about having this. And so what I decided to do was to start selling it. And it's normally £497 per person if anyone is interested, but I've decided to give a special conference deal for today for £250 if anyone does want it. So come and see me in the speaker's corner. But I'm not going to push it too hard. Thank you very much. Does anyone have any questions? Who has a question? Let's rephrase it. Yes?
Yeah, in terms of responding directly to an individual email, I can see exactly what you're saying there.
Yeah.
Can you recommend anything in terms of if you were to send out an email shot to a wide audience, whether would you use particular NLP techniques?
Yeah, what's really interesting about that is that if you were to use kinesthetic language to a visual person, they'll be turned off. But if you use kinesthetic and visual language to a kinesthetic person, they would ignore the visual language and hone in on the kinesthetic. So with an email shot, what you'd be looking for in that analysis is a full 25% split if you can. I've done that with newsletter articles and with press releases. And what I found is that I sent out a press release one day and it just didn't get published at all. The following week I then rewrote it to use different predicates from different modal, different representation systems. And what I found was that they published it immediately, and they published it in full without any editing. And
do you find that there's an equal 25% split between those four?
If you can get as close to that as possible.
But in terms of demographics, I mean, for example,
no, absolutely not. No.
If our audience is, 75% female to male, is there then would you then split it further between more kinesthetic than visual?
Yeah, Bandler did some work on that actually, and I think Grinder also mentioned it in Whispering in the Wind that there tends to be a higher percentage going towards visual, and then auditory, then a mix between kinesthetic and audio digital after that. So from that point of view, no, there is a higher split towards visual, a much higher split towards visual. And if you're going to use any one particular representation system, I definitely use visual. But the point is that people don't tend to pay any attention to other representation systems other than their favoured one. Right. And so, and yes, everyone is multimodal from that point of view, but they only hone in on their preferred one. Well, they tend to only hone in on their preferred one. And so if you were to use visual rather than auditory, then it wouldn't be a very good idea. So I would tend to split it 25% in order to satisfy everyone, really. Does that answer your question? Who else? Incidentally, I can't quite remember why I brought this one up, but NLP, Joseph O'Connor says, it's psychological skills for understanding and influencing people. And I just love the fact that there's influencing people in there, because from an ethics point of view, everyone influences people all the time anyway. It's just doing it consciously with NLP. Any more questions at all?
I thought that was all absolutely fascinating, but the question I really want to ask you is, have you been wearing that waistcoat all day?
Yes. And it's getting hotter, actually. I don't know whether it's these lights or the pressure, but yes.
I just want to go on the microphone, to be honest.
You wanted to try out the yellow. It's great.
Have you noticed in terms of vocational areas, such as, I mean, I've run training courses for a whole group of scientists, for instance, who, as a generalisation, I would say they're more auditory digital. Is that something that needs to be considered if you're addressing engineers or primary school teachers who are predominantly female, for instance?
Again, not really. Although, yes, I absolutely, totally agree with you. Scientists will tend to be audio-digital. Counsellors and public speakers will often be more kinesthetic. Artists tend to be more visual, and DJs tend to be more audio. You know, I don't know whether there is some sort of correlation with the reason that they go into these professions, or the profession themselves actually changes the perception and the preference of the individual. But when you're actually communicating to them, there will be some people, you know, I know a designer who's very kinesthetic. I know, you know, Albert Einstein, for example, was very sort of kinesthetic in his thinking, although he was a scientist. Mozart, for example, was very visual, and he actually wrote down everything that he composed. I suppose, you know, Handel might be something different again, and Beethoven probably wouldn't be audio come the end. Leonardo da Vinci, probably not either. But when you're looking at different demographics like that, I think you need to also bear in mind that there will be people who are outside of that modal operator, and so they'll probably be turned off if you only use that language. You know, you might really turn on some of them, but there is a risk that you're going to turn off others. And so I would always, if you're going to send it out to more than one person, I'd always split it. Anyone else? Okay, thank you very much.